Pecha Kucha 247, Griffith from Berserk. So this is a little bit of a weird situation I'm in, where I did something this week, which was draw Griffith from Berserk, but it's going to be in a different process video where I've got actually a lot of footage. And I'm going to talk about what happened as I do it. So I'm going to mention some key things in passing, but actually let's just talk about other stuff. So I saw this trailer of Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog this week, and I groaned until I laughed. It's a surreal situation, but my God. I wish I could say something succinct and concise and biting about this, but honestly, I groaned until I laughed. And then I watched something entertaining. Ethereal Snake, he's had this ongoing thing where he's had this little vignette idea and it's turned into this thing, this glorious thing with Patreon backers funding his animation. And it's kind of like Mickey has PTSD, he was in Vietnam, Goofy's died, and it's 15 minutes of awesomeness. One of the key points is that Steamboat Willie footage is kind of used, but it's a bit vague. But my understanding is that Mickey Mouse is slowly starting to become public domain. Steamboat Willie, his first representation in history, has passed the statute of limitations or whatever you call it. So it's fair use. It's open to the public. I also read some comic books, 3 Wolverine-related comic books, 2 of them Sabretooth stories. Very interesting in the parallels and the polar opposites between them. The first one, Death Hunt, I didn't even know it had a name. Very, very 1990s, illustrated by, I think his name's Hank Texeria. Tex Hanksarea? No, it doesn't matter what his name is, right? I like his style, he uses a lot of heavy blacks. One of the things I noted in this 90s story of Sabretooth doing something as a hired assassin is he talks way too fucking much. In that way that 90s characters talk, in the way that they think kids would like them to talk, because they're still trying to sell comics to 10-year-olds. There are major kind of canonical consequences of the first story. Main characters die, turns out Sabretooth has a son. But in the second story I read, it's like the polar opposite. Open Season is a story written and illustrated clearly decades afterwards, using modern sensibilities, where it's like it's a story about nothing and Sabretooth barely says anything, and it has no value for the opposite reasons. I love Sabretooth's characterization in this. He's in some town in the middle of like Alaska, and it looks like he's killing a bunch of people in this town, and then like a bunch of sailors show up to try and figure out what's going on. It's like The Thing from the 80s. It's written like a horror movie, but it turns out Sabretooth isn't killing people. This abominable snowman is, and Sabretooth is just there to kill it so he can make a coat out of it. And he's a smug cunt, and every time he says something, it's just to prove he's a smug cunt, and I fucking love it. But it's meaningless. Speaking of meaningless, The End, Wolverine, is a story about, well, it's supposed to be about the end of Wolverine's life, but it's just another comic book that starts where it starts and ends where it ends, as part of an ongoing series that Marvel Comics did a long time ago. I've got the X-Men The End, which I'm probably going to read again as well. Wolverine it's like 100 years in the future or 200 years in the future. I don't care. It doesn't matter. He's an old man living in the wilderness. He's given up on everything, and then, the story starts, because the story has to have a fucking arc, doesn't it? So he goes on this wild goose chase around the world because someone is manipulating him from the shadows all of a sudden, and it turns out it's his long lost brother that he never knew he had, who wants to get him up on whatever the fuck it is he thinks now is the time to bring it up. And he just talks in retcons. It's fantastic. Oh, you've known me your whole life, but you don't remember because your healing factor heals it out of your brain. The world which Wolverine lives in is very ambiguous. Wolverine seems to regard the current X-Men as something akin to Nazis, as he calls one of them a Nazi straight up. But it's never elucidated what he's referring to or anything else. Interesting, but definitely that's a try before you buy. So I did read the rest of Berserk this week, because Kentaro Miura is dead. There's never going to be any more that's official. And I was talking to a friend about this. And it made me think, you know what, let me draw someone from Berserk. I draw Guts, but you know what, drawing Griffith is harder, so let me do that. I got some reference pictures to use to try and get a sense of the character, and then I thought, you know what, let's film it. Let's turn it into content. It took me 35 minutes just to get the pictures and to edit them so I'd have something to use for reference. And it's been so long since I've screen recorded, I've forgotten how. And then I had the bizarre problem where I was recording the wrong screen, and I've not even found a solution to it. I just kind of do something a certain way and it seems to work out. Because the thing about doing anything in life is sometimes you just got to brute force it. The world will always try and get in your way. You just got to fucking, if you want to do it, then fucking do it. So I drew some sketches, I did some reference, and I think I managed to get to a place where I'm happy with my ability to draw Griffith the way I would draw him if I drew him in a Smiley Show. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just draw a Smiley Show page of how I would, how I think Griffith would interact with the cast. And there's no dialogue, except I couldn't help but have Vegeta say something insulting. More because it was difficult to draw him in some kind of really succinct pose, because he should be saying something smug. And so I filmed all this, and I'm going to put it up in a separate video in the midweek. I need to edit it, and I need to figure out how long it's going to be, because there's quite a lot of content. I'm happy with where I got. I didn't work too hard, but I must confess at the start of this project, I just wanted to cut and run, because it's actually a project, and it has a beginning, middle, and an end, and that kind of shit is a little bit intimidating for a guy who doesn't really want to get stuck doing anything. Right, so you can expect more on this before next week, but I will also see you in the next Pecha Kucha. That's the end of Pecha Kucha 247, and I will see you next time.